The rain fell hard that night, blurring the city lights into rivers of gold and blue. Cars hissed past in the distance, their reflections streaking across wet pavement. Under a flickering streetlight stood a young woman named Maya. Her jacket was soaked through, her hair clinging to her face, and her hands trembled as she clutched a small worn purse, the only thing she had left. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. Rent due. Final notice. She let out a weak laugh, the kind that wasn't joy but disbelief, then locked the screen and stared up at the sky, whispering, "Why does it always have to rain when everything falls apart?" Just then, a yellow cab rolled slowly to the curb beside her. The headlights reflected in her tired eyes. The driver rolled down his window, his voice steady, calm, and almost kind. "Need a ride?" Maya shook her head quickly. "I can't afford it." The man studied her quietly. There was no pity in his gaze, just a stillness, like he understood something she didn't say. He unlocked the door. "Get in," he said softly. "I'm heading that way anyway." Maya hesitated. "I really can't pay you." "Then don't," the driver said simply. "Call it a ride for company." For a long moment, all she could hear was the sound of the rain drumming against the roof of the cab. Something about his tone, quiet, certain, made her feel safe enough to trust him. So she got in. Inside, the air was warm. The faint hum of the engine filled the silence. Maya wiped raindrops from her face and leaned back against the seat. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Long night?" he asked. Maya gave a small, tired smile. "Long life." He smiled back faintly. "Good," he said. "Means you're still living it." For the first time that night, Maya let out a real breath. Something about his words, so simple, so unexpected, stirred something in her heart. As the cab pulled away, headlights cutting through the mist, the city faded behind them. She didn't know where this road would lead, or who this man really was. But that night, sitting in the back of a stranger's cab, something inside her began to change. She thought he was just a driver. She didn't know. He was about to open the door to a life she never imagined. If this moved you already, don't just watch. Subscribe now. What happens next will make you believe in fate again. Before that night, Maya's life had been a quiet kind of struggle. The kind that doesn't make headlines, but breaks a person slowly, piece by piece. She lived in a small studio apartment on the edge of the city. The kind with peeling paint, a window that barely opened, and a heater that only worked when it felt like it. Every morning, she woke up to the same sound, the neighbor's alarm clock through the thin walls, reminding her that another day of survival had just begun. She worked as a waitress at a downtown diner, juggling double shifts just to keep the lights on. Her hands were always tired, her feet always sore, and her smile, though kind, had started to fade. But what hurt her most wasn't the long hours. It was the feeling that no matter how hard she tried, she was still invisible. Maya had dreams once. She wanted to be an artist, to paint scenes that told stories words couldn't. But somewhere between overdue bills, broken promises, and the reality of life alone in the city, those dreams got buried under exhaustion. She had no family left, except her younger sister, Clara, a college student who looked up to her as if she could move mountains. Maya didn't have the heart to tell her that some days, she could barely afford groceries. On her lunch breaks, she'd sit outside the diner, sketching faces of strangers in the margins of her notebook. She loved observing people, the way someone held their coffee, or how laughter could light up a whole street corner. She found beauty in things most people overlooked. But she often wondered, who ever looked at her that way? A few weeks before that rainy night, life had given her another blow. The diner had a new manager, younger, colder, and obsessed with cutting costs. He started taking her shifts away little by little until her paycheck couldn't even cover rent. When she tried to speak up, he looked her dead in the eye and said, "Maybe you should find a job that fits your situation better." That night, Maya sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by bills she couldn't pay, staring at a notice that said, "Eviction pending." She picked up her sketchbook again, flipping through the pages of faces she'd drawn, people she'd never meet, moments she'd never live, and whispered, "Maybe this city just isn't for people like me." Still, she didn't give up completely. She got up the next morning, washed her uniform, and went out looking for work again, walking miles under a gray sky with her resume tucked in her purse. By the time evening came, her shoes were soaked, her stomach empty, and her heart heavier than ever. That's when the rain began to fall, and that's when she saw the cab stop in front of her. She didn't know it yet, but that simple ride would become the beginning of the story that would change everything. The cab moved through the rain like a quiet heartbeat in the middle of a restless city. Inside, the warmth from the vents mixed with the faint smell of leather and old coffee. Maya sat in the back seat, still shivering slightly, watching streetlights blur past her window like golden ghosts. Ethan drove without saying much. He didn't need to. There was something strangely comforting about the silence between them, the kind that didn't demand words. After a while, he spoke softly. "You remind me of someone," he said. Maya looked up, startled. "Oh, who?" He gave a small smile, eyes still on the road. Someone who didn't know how strong she was until life forced her to be. Maya looked back out the window, unsure how to respond. No one had ever seen through her that easily. The rain had slowed now. The cab turned into a quieter part of town, streets lined with dim cafes and small bookstores. Maya frowned. "This isn't the direction I gave you," she said gently. Ethan glanced at her through the mirror. "I know," he said. "There's a 24-hour diner up ahead. You look like you haven't eaten." Maya blinked, surprised. "I told you I can't." He interrupted kindly. "Relax. I was going there anyway." When the cab stopped, she hesitated before following him inside. The diner was nearly empty, just the hum of an old jukebox and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. They sat at a booth by the window. Rain streaked down the glass beside them, the city lights shimmering beyond. A waitress approached, smiling politely. "What can I get you?" Ethan looked at Maya first. "Go ahead," he said. She stared at the menu, embarrassed. "Just coffee," she whispered. He raised an eyebrow. "You sure? It's late. You need something warm." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "I really can't, it's fine." He smiled and turned to the waitress. "2 coffees. And a plate of pancakes. With strawberries." Maya started to protest, but he stopped her gently. "Consider it a trade," he said. "You share your story. I'll share the pancakes." That made her laugh, softly, but genuinely. And for the first time that day, she didn't feel invisible. When the food arrived, she hesitated before taking the first bite. Her stomach growled, betraying her. Ethan said nothing, just watched quietly as she finally began to eat. There was no judgment in his eyes, only quiet understanding. After a few minutes he asked, "So, what brought you out in the rain tonight?" Maya set her fork down slowly. "I was looking for a job," she said, voice trembling. "I've been trying for weeks. Rent's overdue, bills keep piling up. She took a deep breath. "I just needed something to work out for once." Ethan nodded slowly, taking in every word. "It will," he said quietly. "Sometimes the rain doesn't mean it's over. Sometimes it's the world washing things clean." Something about that line hit her harder than she expected. Her throat tightened, and she blinked back tears. He didn't pry. He just let her breathe. And for the first time in a long time, Maya felt safe. After they left the diner, Ethan opened the door for her and smiled. "Where to now?" She gave him an address, one of those run-down neighborhoods where even the streetlights flickered in exhaustion. When they arrived, she reached into her purse, pulling out a few crumpled bills. "Please," she said, "take this. I can't let you pay for everything." He shook his head. "You already did." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He met her eyes, kind, unwavering. You reminded me what compassion looks like. Before she could reply, he reached into his jacket pocket and handed her something small, a plain white business card. Call this number tomorrow, he said. Tell them Ethan sent you. She turned it over. There was no logo, no title, just a phone number written neatly in black ink. What's this? She asked. An opportunity, he said. You'll understand tomorrow. And before she could say another word, he smiled, got back into the cab, and drove away into the rain. Maya stood there in the cold, clutching the mysterious card, her heart pounding with questions she couldn't answer. She had no idea that this moment, this quiet act of kindness from a stranger, was about to rewrite her entire story. The next morning, sunlight streamed weakly through Maya's cracked blinds. For a few seconds, she didn't move. The events of last night felt too unreal to trust, like a dream she was scared to wake from. Then she saw it, the white business card on her bedside table. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands again. No company name, no title, just a number. Her chest tightened. What if it was fake? What if she'd been foolish to hope, even for a moment? Still, something inside her whispered, what if it's real? She took a breath and dialed the number. A calm female voice answered. Good morning, Ethan Properties. How may I help you? Maya froze. I was told to call this number. He said his name was Ethan. The woman's tone immediately softened. Ah, yes. You must be Maya. Mr. Ethan mentioned you. Can you come by the main office today? Her pulse skipped. Office? Where is that? The woman gave her the address. Maya's mouth fell open. That wasn't just any office. It was one of the tallest glass towers in the city, the kind of building she'd only ever walked past on her way to catch the bus. When she arrived later that afternoon, she felt completely out of place. Her simple white blouse and worn flats clashed against the suits and heels that filled the lobby. The receptionist smiled warmly. You're here for Mr. Ethan? Maya nodded nervously. Top floor, the woman said. He's expecting you. As the elevator climbed higher and higher, her reflection stared back at her from the silver doors. Anxious, hopeful, afraid. She didn't know what waited above, but she knew one thing. Nothing about last night was ordinary. When the doors opened, sunlight flooded the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the skyline. And there, standing beside a polished desk, was the cab driver. Only this time, he wasn't in a driver's jacket. He was in a tailored navy suit. Maya's breath caught. You! Ethan smiled. I told you we'd meet again. She blinked, completely disoriented. I thought you were a driver. He chuckled softly. Sometimes I am. Depends on the day. He gestured for her to sit. I'm sorry for the surprise. I didn't want you to see me as anyone else last night. Just a person. Not the title, not the money. Maya sat down slowly, still trying to process what she was hearing. Ethan continued. I started this company from nothing. Years ago, I was the one sitting in the back seat, praying for a break. Someone took a chance on me when they didn't have to. I try to do the same whenever I can. She looked at him, stunned. You mean, this company? It's mine, he said gently. And I'd like to offer you something. A position here. Assistant in our Community Projects Division. You'd be helping manage our local outreach programs. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't even know what to say. Just say you'll try, Ethan said with a smile. She nodded slowly, whispering, I will. Weeks passed. Maya's life began to transform, piece by piece. She worked hard, showing up early, staying late, taking notes on everything. Ethan watched quietly, never treating her differently from anyone else, though she often caught him smiling when he thought she wasn't looking. One evening, she stayed after hours to help organize a charity file drive. When she returned a folder to Ethan's office, she noticed something strange, a framed photo on his desk. It was old and faded, but unmistakable. A young woman, holding a little girl in front of a yellow cab. Maya froze. She knew that face. It was the same woman from the photo she kept in her own wallet, her mother. Her heart pounded as a wave of confusion swept through her. She looked closer. It couldn't be. Before she could stop herself, she whispered, "Why do you have this?" Ethan looked up from his desk. The color drained from his face. "You've seen that picture before?" he asked carefully. She nodded, voice shaking. "That's my mother." Silence filled the room. Ethan stood slowly, walking over to her. His voice broke as he said, "Your mother's name was Clara?" Maya's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" He closed his eyes for a moment. "Because I knew her. Years ago. Before she had you. She saved my life when I was at my lowest." Maya stepped back, trembling. "Saved you? How?" He took a deep breath. "I was a cab driver once. Not pretending, but for real. I'd lost everything. Your mother was one of my passengers. She gave me a reason to start over. She told me, kindness doesn't cost a thing, but it can make a man rich in ways money never will. I built everything I have now because of her words." Maya's throat tightened. "You mean, all this time you knew her?" "I didn't know she had a daughter," he said softly. "Not until now." The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the city outside the glass walls. And as tears filled Maya's eyes, Ethan whispered, "Maybe fate brought us together again, because I owe your mother everything." Maya didn't speak for a long time. Her hands trembled as she held the photo, tracing her mother's smile with her thumb. It didn't make sense. Her mother, gone for years now, was somehow tied to this man, this stranger who had just changed her life. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes filled with memories that seemed to ache as much as they glowed. "She was the kindest person I ever met," he said quietly. "It was nearly 20 years ago. I was working nights, sleeping in my car between shifts. My wife had left. I was drowning in debt. I didn't even want to wake up most mornings." He paused, staring out the window as if trying to find that younger version of himself in the rain-soaked reflection. "One night, your mother hailed my cab outside a diner. I almost didn't stop. I was too tired, too angry at life. But something about her, the way she smiled, the way she carried herself, made me pull over." He laughed softly, but it was a sad kind of laugh. "She asked me if I believed people could start over. I told her no. I told her I'd ruined everything I touched." Ethan turned back toward Maya. And she said, "Then it's time to start touching better things." A single tear rolled down his cheek. "That night, she gave me the biggest tip anyone ever had. But it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the note she left wrapped around it. It said, 'When you find yourself again, help someone else do the same.'" Maya's throat tightened. "That sounds like her," she whispered. "She always believed kindness could fix anything." He nodded. "She was right. I used that money to rent a room, to clean up, to take one small step forward. That step turned into 2, then 10, then a life. And every time things got hard, I'd open that note and remember what she said." He walked to his desk drawer and pulled out a small worn piece of paper. He handed it to her gently. The ink was faded, but the words were still there. Her mother's handwriting, looping and soft. "When you find yourself again, help someone else do the same." Maya pressed it to her chest, her eyes brimming. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "She never told me any of this." "She wouldn't," Ethan said quietly. "Your mother wasn't the kind of woman who helped people for recognition. She just did it because she couldn't stop caring." Maya sank into the chair, emotion flooding her chest. "She died when I was 15. I thought the world just moved on. But now. Ethan shook his head slowly. The world doesn't move on from people like her, Maya. They leave ripples that keep saving people long after they're gone. Silence filled the room again, but it wasn't the empty kind. It was full, heavy with understanding, gratitude, and something deeper neither of them could name. Then Ethan said softly, "You know what's strange? The night I picked you up, I wasn't supposed to be driving. My chauffeur called in sick, and I decided to take the car myself. I told myself it was just for the drive, just to clear my head. But I think it was something else." Maya looked up at him, eyes wet but steady. "What do you mean?" "I think your mother sent you," he said. "Or maybe the universe did. Either way, I know I was meant to stop that night." Her lips trembled. "You really believe that?" He nodded. "With everything I have." He paused, then added softly, "You asked me once why I offered you that job. It wasn't charity, Maya. It was recognition. I saw the same fire in you that your mother had. The kind that refuses to die, no matter how hard the world tries to bury it." She tried to speak, but her voice broke. I thought I was a nobody." Ethan's voice was gentle, steady. "You're not a nobody. You're the reason I finally fulfilled the promise I made 20 years ago." Maya stared at him, confused. "What promise?" He smiled faintly. "To help someone else find themselves, the way your mother helped me." Her tears fell freely now. She tried to wipe them away, but he reached out and handed her a tissue with quiet tenderness. Then, he reached into his desk again and pulled out a small envelope. "Your mother would have wanted you to have this," he said. Maya opened it carefully. Inside was a sketch, one she had drawn as a child, framed and perfectly preserved. Her breath caught. "How did you?" "She gave it to me," he said, "the night she rode in my cab. She told me it was drawn by her daughter. She said, 'She draws the way some people breathe. She doesn't know how not to.'" Maya held the drawing, her vision blurring with tears. "I don't even remember her giving this away. She wanted it to remind someone else that beauty exists even in broken things," Ethan said softly. "And it did. It reminded me to keep going." They both stood in silence, the past and present intertwining like threads finally meeting again. Maya looked up at him and whispered, "So what happens now?" Ethan smiled through the ache in his chest. "Now we keep the promise. Together." She frowned gently. "Together." He nodded. "There's a children's art center we fund through one of our charities. I want you to lead it. Use your gift. Teach those kids what your mother taught me, that kindness and art can rebuild the soul." Maya's lips parted in disbelief. "You'd trust me with that?" "I already do," he said quietly. "Because someone once trusted me when I didn't deserve it." Her heart swelled, and she couldn't stop the tears anymore. She smiled through them, whispering, "Thank you." Ethan's voice softened, full of warmth and closure. "Don't thank me. Thank your mother for showing both of us the way." Outside, the sky began to clear. The rain had stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling into the office like a silent blessing. And for the first time in years, Maya didn't feel lost. She felt found. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. What began as a single act of kindness on a rainy night had become something no one could have predicted: the rebirth of two souls who had both once thought their stories were over. Under Ethan's guidance, Maya began working on the Art Center project, a community space meant for children who had lost too much, too soon. The building itself was an old, abandoned library on the edge of town. Forgotten, dust-covered, and falling apart. But where others saw cracks, Maya saw potential. Every morning, she'd arrive early, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, covered in paint and purpose. She painted murals with soft skies, open fields, and children smiling. Scenes her mother once described when life felt too heavy to bear. The center slowly came to life. a place where laughter began to echo in hallways that had once been silent. Ethan visited often, always quietly, standing in the corner as he watched her guide the children with patience and gentleness. He never announced who he was to anyone there. He just observed with the calm pride of a man watching something sacred unfold. One afternoon, Maya found him sitting on one of the paint-stained benches, lost in thought. She smiled. "You shouldn't sit there. You'll ruin that nice suit." He chuckled. "I've got more suits than memories. This one's fine." She sat beside him, looking out at the kids painting by the windows. "I still can't believe this place exists." Ethan smiled softly. "It exists because you believed it could." Maya tilted her head toward him. "No, because you believed in me." He met her gaze, his eyes gentle. "Your mother believed in me first. I'm just passing it on." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sunlight poured in through the dusty windows, wrapping them both in a soft golden haze, as if the universe itself had decided to honor what was happening between them. Then Ethan reached into his jacket and handed her an envelope. "Open it," he said. Inside was a legal document, a deed. Maya frowned. "What's this?" "It's yours," he said simply. "The art center. It belongs to you now." She froze. "Ethan, I can't." He shook his head. "You already have. You've breathed life back into this place. You've done what even money couldn't do. You gave it soul." Her hands trembled as she clutched the papers. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because," he said softly, "when your mother helped me, I promised her I'd find a way to make her kindness live forever. I think we just did." Her tears fell freely now. "She'd be so proud of you." Ethan smiled, his voice breaking slightly. "No, Maya. She'd be proud of you." The next few minutes passed in silence, the kind that only exists when words fall short. Later that evening, the art center held its first small exhibition. Parents and children filled the room, their laughter spilling through the doors. Every painting told a story, of struggle, of healing, of hope reborn through color. In the middle of it all stood a large mural, painted by Maya herself. It showed a woman handing a light to a cab driver in the rain. Below it, in delicate letters, were the words her mother once wrote. "When you find yourself again, help someone else do the same." Ethan stood before it quietly, his eyes glistening. He whispered, "Thank you, Clara, for keeping your promise alive." Maya joined him, looking up at the mural with a trembling smile. "Do you think she'd like it?" He nodded. "She'd love it. It's her story, and yours." As the lights dimmed and the room filled with applause, Maya turned to Ethan. "You know, I used to think life was just a series of losses, that the people we loved always left." Ethan looked at her gently. "They don't leave, Maya. They lead, if we're willing to follow." Her eyes shone with quiet understanding. "And I did, didn't I? Without even realizing it." He smiled. "You followed her heart. That's why we're both standing here." Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall again. Soft, cleansing, and warm. But this time, neither of them sought shelter. They stood by the door of the art center, side by side, watching the world shimmer under the streetlights. Maya turned to him, her voice soft but certain. "Do you ever think about how one small moment changes everything?" "All the time," he said. "Especially when I remember one rainy night and a young woman who got into a stranger's cab." She laughed, that same laugh from the diner, full of hope, only brighter now. And Ethan smiled, realizing something he hadn't said aloud yet, that she had not only found herself, but helped him find peace too. As the rain continued to fall, the lights of the city reflected in puddles like fragments of stories waiting to be told. And in that moment, beneath the same sky that once watched two lost souls cross paths by chance, the promise made by one woman years ago finally came full circle. It was never just about a cab ride. It was about how love, in its quietest form, can travel through time, changing one life at a time until the world feels whole again. Sometimes, the people who show up in our darkest hour aren't there by accident. Maybe they were sent. Maybe they're proof that kindness echoes, years later, in places we never expect. Maya thought she was stepping into a cab, but really, she was stepping into the rest of her life. And Ethan, a man who'd already lost everything, finally found the one thing money could never buy again: purpose. If this story touched your heart tonight, don't let it end here. Subscribe now, because the next Soul Twist story will remind you again that love, grace, and second chances still exist in this world.